And I know I keep hearing people say, but it's too late. I'm too old. Well, let me tell you, one of the greatest apostles, one of the greatest ministers of the 20th century was a man named Smith Wigglesworth. Smith Wigglesworth started his ministry when he was in his 50s. And he became one of the greatest men of God in the 20th century. I mean, he was a plumber up to his 50s, but then he got on with the call of God in his life. If you look at Moses, Moses was 80 when he started the call of God in his life. Wasn't too late for him. I'm thinking about another man. You know, back in 2008, we had 3 IT guys that worked for Messenger International, and one of them's name was Bill. And every time I walked by Bill's desk, he just talked about Africa too much. And he'd have pictures of Africa up on his desk. So one day I called Bill in and I said, Bill, I'll buy you and your wife a one-way ticket to Kenya. Now, Bill was 55 years old, and his wife was 62 at that time. He said, can I talk to my wife about it? I said, sure, the offer stands. Next morning, he and Patricia both came in. They said, we're going. So we bought him a one-way ticket to Nairobi, Kenya, right? In the last 8 years, you know what they've done? They've set up 16 Bible schools using Messenger International resources in West Africa, using generators in some of their locations. And they're teaching pastors in the bush the Word of God. He was sitting in my office 3 months ago. He looked at me and he said, John, I've had malaria 17 times. And he's laughing about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, malaria. I mean, my international director says he's had malaria twice in his life, and he says, John, I hope I never get it again. It is the worst thing going. And yet he says, I've had it 17 times. And he's laughing. And he said, you know what I told my kids on this trip? I said, Bill, what did you tell your kids on this trip? He said, if you want to see your mom and I buried, you're going to have to fly to Africa because we're not coming back. He said, I am so happy. Do you know he's 62 years old and she's 69, but yet they're having the time of their life. Why? Because they're in their calling of what God's created them to do. They're building God's house. They're building His custom home.